This movie had so much potential. Potential to be an absolute 5-star movie. But unfortunately, it's being demoted to 3 stars over one tiny, tiny little thing. So, this movie has an interesting premise. There's a character you actually feel things for. Her name is Marnie Watson. She's played by Famke Janssen. She was married for far too long to Mike Watson. He was a New York City cop and abusive towards her when shit was just not working out at his job. And she made several police reports, and all of them were ignored. She attempted to get out and go and live with her mom and safely file for divorce once she was away, but fate stepped in and fucked her sideways like fate likes to do. And wouldn't you know it, he found out about it and he came at her with a knife. So Marnie, in an attempt to save her life, stabbed her husband in the neck and the face and ended up going to jail for manslaughter. Now, I don't know if she says later when she's recounting this story to the boy who delivers her groceries that she stabbed him in the face and the neck 3 times. I don't know if that's 3 times face and neck or just 2 times in the neck, and then she looked at him and said straight up, "You know what, Mike? Fuck your face," and then stabbed him in the face. She got out, probably due to good behavior and overcrowding and all of that jazz, and is supposed to spend the remainder of her sentence on house arrest. So a manslaughter sentence is usually like 10 years. Let's say she spent 5 years in jail and now she's going to spend 5 years on house arrest. Not long after she gets back, she gets a job. She ends up making friends with a boy who delivers her groceries. There's 2 non sequitur jump scares before the shit really starts going. There's a cat that's been taking up residence in her house, and then there's a hobo that took up residence in her house, and there's 2 little fake out jump scares that kind of count against the film's overall score. And there's a long montage of her being bored on house arrest that counts against the film's overall score. And there's one set, there's one location. We do not need a bunch of establishing shots of the outside of houses all the time. Other than that, cinematography is phenomenal in this film. There's not a bunch of stupid Dutch angles. They never once turned the frickin' camera upside down. There's not a bunch of horrible color gradients and nobody's washed out. There's not a bunch of Michael Bay type stuff where somebody has just too rich of color on their face. It's very natural, and the atmosphere they build is palpable. It's like you can actually feel it. This movie does well at building atmosphere. The acting is great. Of course it is. Famke Janssen puts on an amazing performance. Bobby Cannavale also puts on an amazing performance. One little nitpick about Famke is that sometimes she has an accent and sometimes she doesn't, but whatever. That's just my one little nitpick. And then we get to what it's about. Marnie is living in the house where her dead husband is haunting. So we're going to just drop some little pins here and we're going to pick them up later. First pin, when she stabbed her husband, there was a blood spatter. And it was about the size of that picture of my boy Tom Felton. And football shaped. Now, let's just unpack that right now and say why it does not work. Because, and yes, this review will have spoilers, because when you stab someone in the face and the neck, blood spurts out in little itty bitty lines all over. It does not pool. That blood looked very much like a movie set blood, and I wish movie sets would just pick a lane and go with it. You can't shoot someone in the sternum and have them explode in a fucking car, okay? You can't do that. And you can't have an actual spurting blood thing to where there would be an inordinate amount of blood. Have it be just a small little thing on the wall. And of course, this movie got kind of tropey with her painting over it, and then it showing up again, and her painting over it, and then it showing up again. But what are you gonna do? So, I believe there should be more blood, and here's why. One time when I was working in a healthcare facility, there was a guy who had a scab right here. He picked it. He went from where he was sitting to the bathroom to grab a washcloth to put that on his face, then go back to get his call light. I walked in, it looked like a homicide had taken place. He didn't die. This guy didn't die. He lost a boatload of blood, but he did not die. So, if one tiny little scab right here on your nose can be picked and blood can spurt everywhere, there really should have been more blood all over. She should have had a hard time cleaning all the blood out of that bucket kitchen. Now, let's get to Bobby Cannavale's character, Lou Shanks. One thing that doesn't work about him logistically is that he would not be able to sit outside her house and watch her all the time because it takes an awful lot of funds to be allocated to one person for a stakeout, and there has to be a reason. There has to be. To me, it feels like maybe because his partner was killed, he got the detective status based on, you know, like when your roommate commits suicide in college and then you just get to graduate for free. I don't think that's still a thing, but you know what I mean. And he kind of seems like the shaker guy, you know, the sign shaker outside of Pizza Hut and Little Caesars and Domino's. That person is really pissing off the general manager, and they're put outside to shake the sign, and yeah, because they fail at pizza. And yes, I've been the sign shaker before. But that's just kind of what it feels like. Like, yeah, sure, Shanks, go out and you just sit in front of her house all the time, you stalker. He watches her like I watch Bobby's Instagram, wondering if anything's going to happen. Dude, it's been since January 25th. When are you going to post again? I need your posts in my life. I'm not in a good place. And another thing, it would be whole full-blown conflict of interest for him to be sitting out there at all. He is the one who is in charge of her case. He is the one who drove her home from prison. He's the one who has the key to her ankle monitor on his person at all times. That is conflict of interest and a half. Her husband was his partner. That would not be allowed. Now, one thing compliment-wise is that they actually tied up the bit with the house. I thought when I watched it at first, I was ready to do a review. I was ready to do a review based on my initial impression. I had to go back and rewatch it because I realized I was wrong about a lot of stuff. And what I did was I was wrong about the house. See, when you are arrested, and you are standing to trial, they ask you what equity you have in your house, if you have a car that you own that's in your name, how much you make a year, and all of that stuff. Before you go to trial, at like a bail hearing or sentencing or any of that stuff, before they decide to bring in a jury or anything, they ask you what you can afford to put up. And that's how they determine if you can afford a lawyer. So Marnie's mom, to keep her out of jail, spent a lot of money to defend her and to keep the house. And I cannot imagine the property taxes on a fucking brownstone in Brooklyn with, well, what people in Brooklyn would call a yard. When the rest of us people that actually know what a yard looks like would be like, that's not a yard, dude. That's a lot of money spent on something. So let's get back to the plot, shall we? I liked that they tied that up. I liked that her mom got it. I liked that they established that she has no one, with her sister coming and saying, okay, here's the deed to the house, fuck off and get out of my life. I liked that they showed her watching somebody outside and that person looking at her and going, no, husband killer, I'm not going to associate with you. And they drove the point home on how lonely she is when she dressed up as Snow White to do trick-or-treating. And these kids were like, no, that's okay, let's not go near this lady's house. However, the only person she has is a young, obviously British, but has an Italian-sounding name like DiCenzo boy who delivers her groceries. He goes and he gets her books from the library. The books from the library tell her to get rid of all her husband's things. Here's another little plot hole in the floor that we're going to unpack right now. She goes crazy looking for all of his things. Like, she has no sentimental attachment. The very first thing she does when she gets home is she takes all of his crap, she puts it in a suitcase, she takes down all the pictures, all the sentimentality is gone, that'll come up later. She takes all of the pictures and she takes them down to the basement. She doesn't have a lot of movement, hence why the title of the movie is called 100 Feet. And she has to hurry up and go back downstairs and get all that crap and throw it out to the garbage. She attempts to throw the wedding ring down the garbage disposal, but it does not want to grind up. She has to reach her hand in there, and this is where that cinematography and Famke's acting using her whole body. You feel the tension in her fingers as she reaches in to a pre-built little set to fumble around in the dark, looking for this wedding ring that she foolishly threw in there and didn't think about it. She gets her hand out, and then her husband's ghostly hand grabs her and pulls her back down in, and she has to struggle because she can't reach the light switch that turns the disposal off, so she has to stretch out with her leg. I do it, but I'm a fat girl and I don't want to fall off this chair, and then turn the thing off. It is a very high tension scene in the movie. It's well acted, it's well lit, it's everything. It's great. If, we were just going off of that one scene alone, I'd give this movie 5 stars completely. However, she puts the ring back on. She goes on a mad tear through the house, and she finds some loose floorboards. She crawls in this tiny, short little tunnel and makes a whole lot of noise. I thought the ghost was after her, but she's just being noisy. She sees a big fucking bag of cash. She looks at it and she's like, oh my god, my husband was such a dirty cop. She calls a priest. She unburdens her conscience. She asks the priest very nicely to bless the house. He takes the bag of money and fucks off. So she smudges the house with sage. She believes she's got rid of everything that would belong to her husband, and she asks him to get out, and he throws a little temper tantrum and all of the furniture. And he even nails a table to a window. And one little tiny nitpick right here is that everything's back to normal. Like, did she stop and go and take all the shit down, and then her hair appeared wet in the next scene? Did she stop and take all that shit down and then go, oh hey, I have a shower. Man, that shower was not cold enough. It's been a long time. I've been in prison for a while. Let me call my British friend. He's not British. He looks like Jamie Cullum's little brother. The character's not British, the actor is. Let me call my friend and we'll just have some sex. And then her ghost husband sees her having sex and is very pissed. He waits until morning. And I don't know if I've dropped a spoiler warning. I've started this video over and over again. So spoiler warning, here you go. There you go, you got one. She gets up, she looks out the window, she sees Shanks is there, dutiful little Shanks, watching her, making sure she's not doing anything wrong. And then her wedding ring glimmers, and Mike, the ghost husband, picks up DiCenzo and beats him to death in a horrible, gruesome, bloody way. He shoves his face onto the mantle, and right here on his top teeth, he headbutts him until his jaw becomes disconnected. He forces him against the wall. He dislocates his dislocated jaw. He dislocates his shoulders. He ties him into a bunch of knots. It's horrible to behold because it's so violent, and kind of because of the graphics are 2008. And so she puts him back in that floor, in the hole in the floor, and then Shanks just conveniently shows up and says he has an arrest warrant for DiCenzo's arrest. God damn. You have such a way with words, Allison. Such a way. Lord have mercy. So she hurries up, she changes, she cleans up all the blood, she stuffs him into the floor. These two beat cops and Shanks show up, and then, oh, he's not here. He must have snuck out. So the beat cops just up and leave. Shanks and Marnie have issues. There was a moment, another good scene in which Bobby and Famke just showed that they are great actors. One thing I love about Bobby is that he uses his whole body and he uses the set when he acts, and that doesn't mean he chews the scenery. And one thing I love about Famke is all that subtlety that all these women in Vogue are always talking about and always trying to affect. She actually does. She cries real tears. One little nitpick I would say about this character is that she has an accent sometimes, and sometimes she doesn't. But there's a scene where he comes to her and he's trying to get her to open up and say what's going on. He tries it the brute force meathead way originally, and then he goes back and he reads all her police reports, and he says that he wasn't there before, but he will be there now. She opens up to him, says there's a ghost. He says, bitch, you're crazy, and then he leaves. But it's a scene that is acted so well, you almost forget what's about to happen. Mike, the ghost husband, is pissed off because the body falls from the ceiling and falls on Shanks, and then Shanks is like, get your fucking hands up, I'm gonna arrest you. He cuffs her in front. For plot convenience, more or less, you're always supposed to cuff people in back because they're less dangerous that way. It's just a thing. He cuffs her in front. Mike gets mad. He starts throwing them around. Shanks draws his gun, tells him, leave her alone. You leave her alone. Shanks breaks his arm or his wrist or something. Or Mike breaks Shanks' wrist. Shanks shoots something. It erupts into flames. Everything in this house is gas-powered. He throws them both in the basement. There's this scene where there's a camera POV shot, much like in the film The Chair, where it's like it's attached to the person's body, and she tumbles down the stairs. Shanks is out. Marnie's trying to wake him up. He's not waking up. She searches his body for the key to her handcuffs and to her ankle monitor. She gets both off. She gets a window open. Shanks wakes up. Marnie proves she's such a tough bitch by lifting two men, quite possibly over 200 pounds of solid muscle that day. That's one thing I kind of hate about horror movie tropes, is that they completely neuter the men to make the women look strong, and y'all, you can do that without completely neutering the men. But anyway, he gets out, he's laying there, breathing heavy, going through not even half the shit that Marnie's going through. Marnie goes at her husband with a bat. He takes the bat from her. He nearly crushes her windpipe. She's on the ground. This is where the whole tone of the movie changes. Remember how I said in the beginning she took all his clothes out and she put it in his suitcase and threw it with ill regard in the basement? Yeah. We'll get to that. She takes the wedding ring off. She throws it at him, and Mike goes from being a discount sort of billowy Mike Myers kind of ghost that you put on a picture in the ghost app on your phone kind of thing to looking like a full-blown human because he catches the wedding ring and then he explodes and he blows up the entire house. Marnie is told by Shanks to get away, and so she runs away. There's a newspaper scene where it says that Shanks said she died saving him, so she's a hero, and then the guy folds the newspaper down, there she is. Not a bad film. Why does it only get 3 stars? Because of the complete and total tonal shift. There was no sentimentality left in Marnie. And in a 5-year sentence, in a few-year sentence, whenever you go to jail for any reason, makeup is bye-bye. Rings and necklaces are bye-bye. You either do not wear a bra or you wear a bra that does not have an underwire. I can imagine you don't even have shoes with laces in prison, especially if you're there for killing a New York City cop. So, I'm wondering why she would put the ring back on. It's not for sentimentality. She took all the pictures down. I mean, if you think about it, I would be pretty pissed if I lost my wedding ring. But at the same time, this isn't even my wedding ring. My beautiful self got way too fat for my other wedding ring and had to get a discount wedding ring at Kmart before it closed down. So there's that thing. I would be more pissed off if I lost all the pictures I had of me and my husband and me and my friends than I would of the little trinkets that symbolize our love and affection for each other. That ring should have felt more like a mark of enslavement, like the handcuffs that she had on her 2 different times and the ankle monitor she had on her throughout the whole movie, then it should have been something sentimental. There was no reason established for why she was still wearing the ring. If she went, let's say, 5 years without wearing it, then she would have gotten out of the habit of it. The little dip in her finger where the ring had been would be something that she would have got out of the habit of having on. And it's not to feel pretty because once she got home, she took all of his clothes out of the closet, she put all of her spring summery pretty dresses out, and she put her makeup on, she did her hair in pigtails and braids. So that's not what I'm going to go for. She had necklaces and makeup and all of that stuff to feel pretty for. And lots of pretty dresses. The only thing I can think of is a not so clearly established, tenuous attempt at penance as to why she was wearing the ring. Maybe when she was brought back from prison and they gave her all of her shit in the envelope that you get when you're released. Maybe she just put it on out of because Shanks was there and Shanks was watching and she didn't want to hear any bullshit from him. But I don't really see why she would still be wearing it. And you need your plots to be so tight that the audience will not go, no, okay, but what if she'd slipped it into the bag of money that she gave to the preacher? Movie's over. This felt like such a pad the runtime, scapegoat, one ring to ruin the entire plot type of thing that it's raising my hackles. I wanted so much to love this movie through and through that that ring, that whole bit with the ring, made me hate it for the longest time. I had to rewatch it to get a better idea of how I was going to do this review, and I actually loved a lot about it. I'm going to rate it 3 stars. 1 star for the acting, 1 star for the cinematography, and 1 star for the fact that you guys actually know how to do show don't tell and build atmosphere. But that one ring, that just threw it all off. And now if we could circle back to the floorboards. How did you live X amount of years, let's say 16 or so, since Famke Janssen was probably in her mid or late 30s when this film was made in 2008. I think she's in her late 40s now. Say, how could you live, say, 16 years in a house like that, and it didn't say she had a job? She could have just been a housewife. How could you live that long in a house like that and not know there's a hole in the floor? There's a plot hole in the floor. Why? So, ultimately, because of logistical things that just don't work out in real life, plot holes, the one ring to ruin the entire plot, it only gets 3 stars instead of 5. I'm not going to adopt the participation star for this movie. I'm kind of thinking about doing away with that. I'm thinking about doing a lot of different stuff with my channel. If I can, real quick, just talk about something. If you want to just not listen to this, I don't give a shit, don't listen to it. I am probably going to be reviewing more lighthearted stuff. I kind of went through some shit recently, still kind of going through it, but in order to sort of combat it, instead of binging a whole bunch on dark and depressing stuff, I'm going for what they tell you to do when they tell you to diet. Put good in, get good out. You know how, like, if you eat healthy, you'll feel healthy kind of thing? I'm trying to go for something that's a little less blood, guts, ripping to death, stuff like that. And, I'm filming over here because it's a goddamn mess over there. And I'm ashamed. And I'm going to do different things with my channel. I kind of abandoned it because I wasn't feeling it. And yeah. I don't really have an outro, and I should have just like a clever little something I say. But, I don't. Stay basic, bitches, I guess. Or don't. Whatever.